I have no problem with the hire whatsoever, and I will confess to you, Skip Bayless, I'm relying on 2 CFL championships. I'm relying on the expertise of our NFL analyst Steve Young here, who played under this coach when this coach was in San Francisco in the mid-'90s. I believe it was 1995, 1996.
Yep. Correct.
And Steve Young is a Hall of Famer, one of the great quarterbacks we've seen in NFL history, and I'm going to defer to him on this one. This man is perceived as being a brilliant offensive mind, from the George Seifert, Bill Walsh school, if you will. If you were in San Francisco at any point, even though they may not have been there at that time, the bottom line is you learned something from them. And so I'm going to look at it from that standpoint, and I'm going to say to you that I think that if you are the Chicago Bears, it is good to go in this direction. It's the Windy City. It's the Bears. It's their tradition. It's their signature. They're going to have a defense. But the lack of innovation that the Chicago Bears showed with their offense this year was deplorable. Jay Cutler, skill-wise, can be an elite quarterback in this game, easily a top 5 quarterback in this game. With that arm strength, his ability to wing that football, he has it. Brandon Marshall's a stud. We all know this. From that point forward, what did you have? I mean, talk about a drop-off in terms of weapons. Jeffries, you barely looked in this direction. Devin Hester wasn't healthy all season long. You had to go in and out with that. You still had Michael Bush and Matt Forte. You had a passing attack. You had a running attack. Now, granted, the offensive line was abysmal, to say the least. But what you clearly need is an innovative offensive mind, somebody that's going to focus more on putting points on the board. And in order to do that, you know that this coach is going to show up that offensive line because you got to protect your quarterback. You know that he's going to work with Cutler, which is somebody's going to be there to mandate something more from Jay Cutler, a person of his skill sets. You've got the running backs. You've got at least one elite receiver. You've got the necessary weapons in place that if you have a brilliant offensive mind, and I don't know this man to be the case. Again, I'm leaning on Steve Young here. If this guy is a brilliant offensive mind, a man that served as an assistant in the NFL for, 17 years before going to Montreal in the CFL, the reality is this. I believe that the Bears have made the right move because they've got a sleeper, but somebody whose signature is offense. In other words, what they're saying is we've got the pieces. We might be a little bit old, might need to tweak it and make sure we get younger and some more speed, but our defense was better than solid. Our problem was on the offensive side of the ball. That's what they're addressing with this move. And I don't find anything wrong with what Chicago did at all. And I applaud them for going in a different direction instead of digging into the same old hat that everybody else does in terms of coordinators and stuff like that. He's a sleeper. I like it.
Yeah. Oh, sleeper.
I think that's
it woke me up. I didn't see this one coming, man.
Why would you see it coming from the Canadian football league?
Yeah, you didn't see the CFL.
Why would you see that?
Let me count the ways.
Okay.
This is a bad hire by a fairly new GM in Phil Emery, who fired Lovie Smith, I thought, prematurely. I told you, and we went back and forth about it. I thought Lovie deserved another year.
Okay.
You made a strong case the other way.
Yeah.
Phil Emery criticized Lovie Smith, saying he was offensively deficient, it's to your point.
Yeah, and I think that was factual.
Okay, so what did Phil Emery just do? He hired a very controversial offensive coordinator to be his head coach. This is a man in Mark Trestman who has had 12 different jobs, college and pro football, in his career. And every time he moved, which was pretty quickly, it was always lateral, including his last move, leaving the NFL behind to go to the Canadian Football League, which most people would view as a lateral
I can tell you why that is. I got a suspicion about that, but go ahead.
So he was finally a head coach for the Montreal Alouettes, and he did win 2 Grey Cups in a league that is predicated almost solely on offensive football, right? In the Canadian League, certainly more than on defense. I did cover the 49ers for 3 years, and I can tell you, even though I wasn't certainly there in 95 and 96, the name Mark Trestman still lives in infamy with a lot of 49er fans because he became a lightning rod, Trestman did in 95, especially 95, for criticism because the offense began to tail off. It wasn't as all-time great as it had been under Montana and Young before. They brought back Bill Walsh, the great Bill Walsh, my favorite coach of all time.
Wow, that's a move in desperation.
They brought him back in '96 to be an advisor, and he and Trestman clashed because Trestman kind of cold-shouldered Bill and said he wasn't that interested in what Bill had to offer. So after '96, Mark Trestman was gone. And I get Steve Young's love for Mark Trestman. Obviously, it came across that Steve loves him personally and felt like Steve himself was very good. In fact, they lost 2 playoff games to Green Bay under Trestman. The first one was at home. Steve Young threw 65 passes in that game. 65 passes.
In which game?
In the first playoff loss at home to Green Bay. They lost 27-17. He was 32 of 65 for 328, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions in that game. But again, he has an affinity for Mark, which I certainly appreciate. A lot of people don't. He's very controversial, and it always troubled me that he couldn't keep a job for that long. And all of a sudden, he was on to the next team to be a quarterback coach, to the next team to be a coordinator, then a quarterback coach, then a coordinator, then an assistant head coach, then a coordinator, and he just bounced all over the league, college and pro football. And in the end, he even ran his own private quarterback camps, and a lot of the draftees who went to him raved about him, including Brandon Weeden ahead of last year's draft. So does he have some offensive genius about him? Yeah. Do you think he's a proven head coach in the National Football League? I don't. I think you're really taking a flyer on it, and they better still be signature good on defense because the Bears are still built on now an aging defense.